What's good? It's Woog. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel if you are into the fight talk. Jermall Charlo, 30-0, is set to fight Sergey Derevyanchenko, 13-2. Charlo is defending an illegitimate WBC title. That does not make him an illegitimate fighter. Jermall Charlo seems to be a pretty damn good fighter. But the WBC takes their actual champ, Canelo Alvarez, and instead of obligating him to fight their mandatory challenges, which is how the belts and sanctioning bodies work, they're basically giving Canelo their blessing, saying, you go on and fight whoever you want, and wear our WBC belt over your shoulder, you'll be our franchise champion. Then we'll make a new belt, give that to somebody else, and actually enforce our normal sanctioning rules on him. So the holder of this belt, in this case Jermall Charlo, will regularly have to defend against his mandatories. So we now have two WBC middleweight champions, Canelo, our franchise champion, and then Jermall Charlo, our regular champ. Now Charlo had initially won a vacant WBC interim title versus Hugo Centeno Jr., while Triple G and Canelo were having their two fights for the true WBC title. Canelo comes out of that on top. I still don't like how that went down, how those fights were judged, and kind of set history in a very different direction than if that first fight wasn't a draw. But anyway, Canelo comes out of that with the WBC belt. The WBC suddenly makes him their franchise champion. That's a new one. Then they elevate Jermall Charlo from interim champ status to an actual champ, since Canelo is now the franchise champ. Do you see how silly this is? But make no mistake, Jermall Charlo is a really good fighter who I've been wanting to see against an actual good middleweight. Now, he was killing it at 154 junior middleweight, along with his twin brother Jermall Charlo, who is still fighting at 154. And at 154, Jermall Charlo won a real title, the IBF title, versus Cornelius K9 Bundridge. Charlo's beaten Austin Trout. He knocked out Julian J-Rock Williams, who recently upset another 154-pound champ, Jarrett Hurd, and then disappointingly lost his very first title defense versus Jason Rosario, who will be fighting Jermall's twin, Jermall Charlo, in a WBC, WBA, and IBF unification bout on the same fight card as this Jermall Charlo versus Sergey Derevyanchenko fight. Yeah, this is a pretty dope doubleheader. I don't know if it's pay-per-view worthy because of the lack of their current star power, but we'll see. But yeah, Jermall Charlo was a real champ at 154. He then goes up to 160 middleweight, and he's really been fighting nothing but mid-tier opponents, like Jorge Highland of Argentina, who blew out his knee during a TKO loss to Charlo. Or a guy like Dennis Hogan, who's been fighting at 154 and fights well. I thought he got robbed on the scorecards versus rising star Jaime Munguia, but who then goes up to 160 and is clearly too new and too small for that weight class, and he's unable to handle Jermall's power. I wanted to say Jermall's parlo. So Hogan gets knocked out, and Jermall really sets some of those power punches up nicely. But the point being, Jermall Charlo has now had 5 fights at 160, and not one of them has been versus a top 10 middleweight. But he somehow has a belt over his shoulder. I don't know, man. He also struggled big time with clever southpaw Matt Korobov. Korobov was really connecting with that sneaky and accurate straight left hand. He landed that thing cleanly several times throughout the first half of that fight, but Charlo got the decision. And in fairness, he did make some adjustments and kind of took control during the second half of the fight. But I thought Korobov bagged several of those early rounds. So the scorecards didn't reflect what I saw with my 2 eyes. But Charlo won the decision. So the jury is really still out on just how good Charlo is at 160. I can't really take this current title reign seriously, but I also can't deny my own eyes when I see that he is a really good fighter. And now we finally have him going up against a very serious opponent at 160 in Sergey Derevyanchenko. Whew, this is a good one. I'm going to have to take my sweater off for this. It's kind of warming up. But Sergey Derevyanchenko's last 2 out of 3 fights have been a super close loss to Danny Jacobs, whom he trains with, in a very, very close fight. And most recently, a decision loss to Triple G nearly a year ago in a fight that Derevyanchenko deserved to win. Look, I'm a big fan of Triple G. Have been since he was beating Gabe Rosado and Matthew Macklin in 2012 and 2013. But Triple G's fight versus Derevyanchenko was the first fight that my own eyes told me that Triple G definitely lost. Yes, Triple G's only official loss is to Canelo in that second fight, but let's just pretend and take away the judges for just a second. Derevyanchenko is the first guy to come out of the 12 rounds with the noticeably and obviously superior performance. He put Triple G through absolute hell, and although Triple G dug deep to make it competitive, he lost that damn fight, and Derevyanchenko just wasn't rewarded for it. So both the Danny Jacobs and Triple G fights were fights that built Derevyanchenko's stock with the boxing public, but neither went his way decision-wise. So here he is, facing Jermall Charlo, someone who should be a lot more famous. He's got the tools, he's got the look, he's got the attitude, and he's got the record, and kind of a belt, kind of. Now he's got a real opponent on what should be a very big night for both Charlo brothers, visibility-wise, assuming that the promoters didn't play themselves by putting this on pay-per-view. You look at Derevyanchenko's 13-2 record, and it looks like a UFC fighter's record. A good fight record, but boxing often has fighters who build up a 25-0 or 30-1 record before we even learn about them. Seeing a Vasyl Lomachenko, who's fighting for titles in only his second fight, is a rarity, but Loma has one of the most accomplished and decorated amateur backgrounds in boxing history. We're talking a two-time Olympic gold medalist. Derevyanchenko, like Lomachenko, is Ukrainian with a long amateur career. Derevyanchenko didn't turn pro until 27, 28 years old, much older than most fighters. So he had to get right down to business. So there you have 13-2. Again, with both of those losses to Danny Jacobs and Triple G, both super close fights, with the Triple G one just being outright unfair. Derevyanchenko likes to come in, stays pretty low, and he hunts you down with fast and powerful combinations. Not blinding hand speed. I think Charlo has the edge in the hand speed department, but in throwing overwhelming volume and not coming in recklessly either. He's solid defensively. Again, he's crouching low as he's punishing Triple G to the body, and then taking a step to the side, making Triple G have to turn, and then doing even more punishing work to the body. Man, he had Golovkin looking like he was drowning in there. I've never seen Triple G looking outmatched and in trouble. Now, Jermall Charlo has good power and boxes intelligently, framing his punches pretty well, and sometimes catches the opponents with these off-time power shots that lead to a beautiful TKO KO. Twin brother Jermall is blessed with some of that same explosive suddenness, perhaps even a little more so. Jermall Charlo is winning these 160 fights in a similarly impressive fashion as he was at 154. But again, Derevyanchenko, in my view, is a major step up in class for Charlo. And I don't know if the opposite applies. Derevyanchenko might not be the one holding the belt here, but at 34 years old, with that amateur background and then those two Hall of Fame caliber opponents, Jacobs is arguable. Derevyanchenko is the more experienced of these two, even with just 15 professional fights. Certainly more experienced at 160 middleweight, having fought that level of competition. I think that this will be a very competitive fight, and the current betting odds actually reflect that, with Charlo going off as a slight favorite. It's nearly even money here. I was kind of expecting him to be an unreasonably heavy favorite because I see mispriced odds all the time, often if one guy has a bigger name than the other. The boxing betting public often just doesn't know what they don't know. So who am I picking? In some fights, you have the guy who could score the knockout, and sometimes you've got the round winner, we'll say. Now, you've also got different types of round winners. You've got what boxing analyst Richard Dwyer of Gamblers Advisory and Richard Dwyer's YouTube boxing channel calls the winner of the slow rounds. The guy who could pretty comfortably do enough to win the type of round where nobody really gets blasted or hurting. You know, the rounds that kind of have you looking at your watch. That's not the type of round winner that Derevyanchenko is. Derevyanchenko is more like a Jose Ramirez, Sean Porter type of round winner, where you'd better match his energy or his connecting effectiveness, or it'll be very hard for the viewer to be convinced that this guy coming forward and ripping you with these combos didn't win the round. I think Derevyanchenko can make things very uncomfortable for Charlo. And if Charlo is as good as he appears, he could use some of these opportunities to try to throw something deceptive at Derevyanchenko to get him to look at this and then hit him with that. Again, check out his recent knockout of Dennis Hogan for an example of that. By contrast to Charlo, Triple G is more of a patient hunter. I mean, patient, but not that patient. He will hunt you down. He will find you. He will cut the ring off, and he will kill you. At least Triple G in his prime would do those things. But I don't know if Triple G hits as many opponents with punches that they don't see as Charlo does. Now, Triple G does have all-time legendary power, so they would usually go down or out regardless. But I think Jermall might actually have a little more trickery in his game. And maybe trickery is what's needed to slow down or stop a guy like Derevyanchenko. Hit him with the power shot that he doesn't see, like twin brother Jermall did in his first round versus Erickson Lubin. Now, one problem with that idea as it pertains to Derevyanchenko is that he doesn't seem too concerned and doesn't overreact to what you will throw or might throw. He comes into the pocket on his terms, but he still moves around enough to where he's not just cannon fodder for the return fire. This will be very interesting, but I think that Derevyanchenko's willingness to run these red lights, that's another Richard Dwyerism, will, 1, earn him some rounds, but can also, 2, get him knocked out by someone who can intelligently set up fight finishing power punches. I do expect Derevyanchenko to get buzzed at some point during the fight. But I've got Derevyanchenko winning a close decision. But depending on Charlo's punch volume, he does throw more punches than his twin brother Jermall Charlo. Depending on that output, he might be rewarded with the decision win, which would just be the latest in a list of controversial losses for Derevyanchenko. But I'll put it like this. I expect Derevyanchenko to win the fight on my scorecard. I expect him to give Charlo some serious problems. I think Derevyanchenko is going to look damn near like Ricky Hatton before Ricky Hatton started losing. Pressure, 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 combinations. And the 34 years of age might be a factor, but if that performance versus Triple G is any indication, Derevyanchenko still has something left in the tank. So I'm going with the challenger, although I still think that the WBC BS belt is mad sketchy. I mean, if anything, they just need to strip Canelo of his belt if he doesn't want to defend it at middleweight against WBC mandatory, right? Then you could legitimately elevate another champ. But to have two actual champs in one sanctioning body, it's just a money grab. But let me know your thoughts. Who do you have winning this one? Also, which Charlo do you think has the highest upside? Jermall at 154, at least for now, or Jermall at 160? Jermall. Also, can either Jermall Charlo or Sergey Derevyanchenko beat Canelo Alvarez at 160? Leave your comments in the comments, and please like the video, subscribe to the channel if you are into the fight talk. I'm Woog. Thanks for tuning in.